Again, talking about what this life form's doing here, programming frequencies, sliding through hyperspace, and some kind of time tunnel. And then they go back to the biological here, almost like a refocus to try to see what this man is doing. And this is where she discusses that he's involved in some kind of illegal, kind of partially obscured project that he's not going to share.
NORAD closely scrutinized our airspace, including enhancing our radar to pick up more slow-moving objects above our country, around the world. In doing so, they tracked 3 unidentified objects, one in Alaska, Canada, and over Lake Huron in the Midwest. They acted in accordance with established parameters for determining how to deal with unidentified aerial objects in U.S. airspace. At their recommendation, I gave the order to take down these 3 objects due to hazards to civilian commercial air traffic and because we could not rule out the surveillance risk of sensitive facilities.
Yesterday, NORAD confirmed that an unidentified object entered unlawfully Canadian airspace. It represented a reasonable threat to civilian aircraft, so I gave the order to take it down. Canadian and American fighter jets were scrambled, and an American F-22 successfully shot down the object. Recovery teams are on the ground looking to find and analyze the object. Yesterday afternoon, I also spoke with President Biden and confirmed together that we will continue to do everything necessary to protect the sovereignty of our shared North American airspace, but also to do everything necessary to keep our citizens safe.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Daz Smith for a very special episode. Daz, welcome back, my friend.
Nice to be speaking with you again and working with you on this very interesting project.
What honoriness have we gotten ourselves up to? Like, what machinations are we going to put out there? Tell us a little about this project.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Should I go ahead and share the slides and then it will tell people about the project that we developed here? Okay, so you can see the slideshow there. Okay, so we created a remote viewing project and we gave it the name 26053131. That's the name of the project, and that's what we gave to the remote viewers as well as their identification number and their focus. We did this on 14th of June, and myself and you were the taskers on this project. We worked together and we created the task. And we gave it to remote viewers, Carl, David, Dimmy, Josh, and Susan. And you also gave it to a separate psychic, Chris Robinson, is it?
Yeah, so I gave it to a precognitive dreamer, Christopher Robinson, who has 30 years experience working on targets and disrupting like IRA plots and all sorts of other things for MI5 and MI6.
So yeah, so in the end, there was my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 viewers and your psychic kind of remote viewer clairvoyant as well that worked this. Everyone was blind to the target, and they were even blind to the taskers, really. Well, mine were anyway, because they didn't, I didn't tell them who was involved in any way. I just told them it would be a podcast somewhere in the future, and yeah, they may have to get a bit more involved. Now, if I move on to what we did here, so the target queue that we created between us was that we were looking at sentient, non-human biological life and their related technology. And this would be globally, but the final destination for this would be for the US. And this was obviously a past event. And we weren't looking deep in the past. I think we were looking for the latest one that had happened.
Yeah, the last US crash retrieval.
Yes.
In the world.
And we finalized this in our more detailed queue here. The viewers to move to the optimum time, location, and position to describe and sketch in full detail the last retrieval event or crash or otherwise that occurred globally that was either in the US or remitted to US custody that recovered living, sentient, non-human biological life and its related technology, and that they were to do this only. We also put in this caveat that the viewer was to ignore any preconceived task or ideas from ourselves, any myths or any social constructs, stories or otherwise, and they will only report real, actual physical events that occurred. So that was the tasking. That was all hidden. As we said, all they had was the number at the top to work on. Now, we got some data to show in full in a minute, but my summary of the data is here. So all remote viewers reported data consistent with a UAP and life recovery. A technology was observed, and words that they talked about were electromagnetic, floating, futuristic, hyperspace, and they even mentioned gravitational. Life was observed, both human and non-human, with this target. Some observed some dead life, some observed a live life as well. And 3 remote viewers weirdly reported an octopus stroke jellyfish type life form. And I'll show some of that. There was mentions of an illegal project being described by some remote viewers. And some remote viewers also described a life form being involved that was confined to a space. We had several locations described. Mainly they involved a high-up code location, and they felt it was code like Norway or the Antarctic, and another viewer kind of located this in Iceland. So all very similar kind of details on that. But it was very high-up code, mountainous and icy. Also, we had a special location that was kind of described, and this had mundane structures, and it was reported with an exotic structure there that was housing something, and other structures were observed which were like multi-leveled, and these had below ground elements as well. This is only a very small summary of the data, but that's a general kind of overview of the kind of data that the remote viewers got.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
Okay, so this is the latest crash retrieval, wherever that may be.
Yeah.
We were discussing before this podcast recent events in the news, and there were, I think, 3 incidents where UAPs were shot down either over the US or Canada.
Yeah.
At least one was clearly Chinese spy balloon, but I think that was off the East Coast. But there is some incident either kind of in Canada, off the coast of Canada, or in just somewhere, kind of near Alaska,
yeah,
where there's no information forthcoming.
Yes.
Right. And that fits this cold, mountainous location. Yes. Incidentally, and I don't want to share his documents until he's, maybe potentially live on the show, but Christopher Robinson also reported things that were consistent with the crash. And he also he kept hearing this term Kingfisher over and over again, Kingfisher. So he speculates that that could be the name of the operation. So yep. Operation Kingfisher, which makes sense if you're recovering a craft off the coast of Canada, Western Canada, or yep. someplace in that kind of cold region. And that's not to say this is in Canada or not. We don't have enough conclusive information. But if we're trying to correlate to public news sources, that would make sense. Now, it's entirely possible that something covert happened elsewhere in the world in one of these regions. The other thing that he was getting was he kept getting 2 other locations, one in Serbia and one in Tanzania. And going to a prior live stream that I had with Lynn Buchanan. He slipped once, slipped in the point that after he said this, 30 minutes later, he got a knock on his door for someone who was trying to sell him asphalt because the person saw cracks in his asphalt in the middle of the night, which, you really don't see. That's kind of more of a message delivered.
Yeah.
But he slipped and said that there was potentially a base beneath Lake Tanganyika, which I think is in Tanzania. So what Chris Robinson could be seeing is the location of where this craft may have come from.
Yeah.
Right. And again, this is all speculation, and we're just trying to. So imagine that maybe it originated from beneath Lake Tanganyika. Maybe it stops in Serbia and then crashes somewhere in the north. The other things that he noted were that it appeared to have, we looked at the data right before this. It appeared to have been brought down in some sense. So with that, do you want to go through some of the more detailed?
Yeah. Let me share my screen again. You've seen this report, and we haven't done any full analysis on this. So, essentially, what we've done so far is put all the remote viewing data into a quick report, just, for easy access between ourselves, really. Really, with a project this size, we should give it to an independent analyst, and they should pull the information together. But I guess we'll leave that, in this case, to your subscribers and viewers to look at this, because, it's not a paid-for project. No one's being paid for doing this. It's just a bit of fun for us. So, we ended up getting quite a lot of data. I think there's around about 150 pages of data here from the remote viewers. So I'll just go through them quickly one by one, and we can discuss some of the highlights. So we'll start off with Carl. And Carl did a great summary on this as well. And I usually pick out the bits that I find highly relevant in the remote viewers data in yellow as I'm going through it, just as a quick guide there. And she said main gestalt of land, man-made, space and air. And she had the presence of life or biologicals. And she says the space area, and this is her first pass at it as well, is contained enclosed.
It reminds me of a Russian winter.
Yes.
But also watery light and the light on an island.
And, I didn't highlight that. So there will be bits that I didn't pick, I didn't highlight here. But yeah, her description here of the land that is white, silvery, reflective, ice-like, reminds me of the Russian winter. Yeah. So very consistent, and she wasn't alone. There were three out of the 5 or 6 remote viewers that had very similar surroundings. The space is contained and enclosed here under pressure. So I think she's talking about being inside the structure here. Feels like a large bubble of air contained in an architectural structure, white pavilion-like man-made. And this man-made is silvery, rounded, curving. Again, very consistent with, UAP-type craft, enclosed. And she finds it elegant. It feels closed. And it's against the skyline. And there are contrasts of blue, violet, and silvery white. Feels light, bright, contrasty. And something takes place here. She's obviously picking up that where we want to know the information on what this is about. And she said the presence of biologicals here is very important. Biologicals themselves, she feels like there's one presiding, illuminated, indoors, erudite, calm, almost like being the boss, holding the reins of it, holding court. And there's a sense of calm and command. Feels like the biological has something to do with an object that is important, which is, true to us with this target. And it feels like they have to do with something that feels like a book that carries information. It feels like the task also needs to know about a specific location of a man-made, which we did. Again, she was blind to this, so she didn't know any of this information up front. She talks about the movement here. The movement is slow and gliding, and it feels like an energy, electrical, grid-like structure with multiple layers, one on top of the other. She sees ports or exits on one side, and she feels like this is floating. And she talks about, this is where it gets hard for remote viewers. We use our memories to kind of try to explain things. And she says, it feels like an MRI machine here. So I think she's talking about this magnetic kind of information here. She says smooth, high tech. She finds it mesmerizing. It's humming, illuminated, and she feels futuristic and glossy with a magnetic energy. The biological doesn't enjoy being the probing and feels disturbed and angry. It feels as though the dome-like structure is used for inner transportation, containing magnetism and electrics.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
So we're going, and that's basically the summary of our RV session. So here's our RV session, and I've just picked out some of the yellow bits here, that we feel is pertinent to us, and also from her summary. So she starts seeing land here. She starts picking up a man-made, which is futuristic, and then she's also picking up another gestalt here of space and air. And incidentally, as well, she also has the word there, the AOL or stray cat, which is like the imagination guessing of balloon. We are thinking that this is possibly one of the events that we were discussing. That was
which the DoD it called it a UAP, but they tried to conflate it with a balloon to to hide it, right?
So I'm in my mind, I'm kind of thinking that they are describing those most recent events that we had. Next page here, she's talking about land, which is hard, cold, white, ice-like, reflective. Then she goes back into the air, the space and air here, and she says the space air is contained. As I said, we've gone through all this already. She talks about the man-made here, silvery, rounded, curving, enclosed, and she can see this man-made against this skyline. So it's clearly something that's up in the sky. She says it's very elegant, reminds me of the plans of an elegant city here. The man-made is important. Feels the presence of a biological here, and then she starts talking about this biological, as we discussed also in her summary. She says the biological's holding the reins, like holding court. Then she moves to what the tasker needs to know here, and she talks about a green, misty tunnel-like, moving, slowly gliding man-made, and it works on like an electrical grid. It's multi-layered. And she's wrote here a stray cat or an AOL here of like an airport with 2 levels. So she's definitely seeing some kind of very high-tech kind of transportation vehicle kind of data here. She tries drawing a little sketch here, but with remote viewing at this stage, the sketches are always very basic. She just draws this illuminated small kind of thing here. And these star-like things here, I don't know exactly what those are. But she writes here, this reminds her of an MRI machine. So she's clearly picking up some kind of like curved structure here that has something to do with high energy, electricity, and magnetism. And she says, reminds me of stars here, but maybe she is picking up, an object in the sky, and maybe these are actually these real stars in the sky. It's hard to know at this stage. But definitely a magnetic, high-tech feel here. She wrote here, mesmerizing, illuminated with light. Again, in our sketch here, we don't know where this fits in at this stage, but interesting data. She moves on here, man-made, structural, electrical, magnetic, futuristic, curved, glossy. It's illuminated, large, curved, and it's domed, has several levels to it, and it draws her in. It feels like it has like a black light effect, very luminescent, violet, and aware of a frequency here. She also senses an important biological and a book of information. More on the biological here, feels synthetic. It's very angry and disturbed. It doesn't like what's happening here. And it's all to do with like domes, transportation, electrics, magnetism. Something here about air domes traveling on a grid, quantum communication, and a source of information here. And this is just some details of her summary that we went through earlier here that we picked out. So that's just her summary there. Now we sent her back in to get more data, what we call a retask. And I always probe them on their data. I don't try to introduce anything new. I reference their data and say, you said this, now go back and get more on this. So, she talked about the movement, and I told her, can you expand on what this is, the what, the why, the who, the how, and to sketch it. Then I referred to her data where she said the biological doesn't enjoy probing. And I've asked her to expand this, the what, the where, the why, and also to sketch that. So this is the summary of her information. Again, when she goes back in, she says the man-made is smooth, white, plastically closed in, stepped, curving, reflective, and spacious, and it has a modern feeling. It feels like there is a location with the structure, and it's reflective, watery, stony, white, and bluish. Feels like the tasker is looking for something in this location where it reminds me of an artifact. It's a preserved object, which feels like it's hiding in plain sight. It's man-made and reminds her of a pyramid because of the energy coming off the stone. And it feels like it's now part of the land and feels over land that has been constructed onto it. Feels contrasty as though there are clouds over it and it has an electromagnetic feel. It somehow feels trenched, dug out, and is large. So I'm from her impression, I'm kind of getting the impression here that the data is indicating that it's an object that's embedded slightly in the land surface and it's being, dug out and retrieved here. Because she's talking about, there's a trench-like incision in a stony base. It's in an alcove. It has that kind of feeling to it. If this were a larger project, I would have got them to go back several more times and describe each bit in detail. But we were doing this as an ad hoc project, really.
Yeah.
Then goes on to talk about the biological again. The biological is thin, male, has pale, almost translucent skin. He's very fussy, obsessive, and vigilant, and he moves with a strange gait. He walks floppily. He is simply clothed, but his clothes somehow feel different. It feels as though they are made for warmth. It feels as though he is part of a time experiment and that he himself is running an experiment. He's vigilant, calculating, and he's even aware of her presence just looking at her with remote viewing. It feels like he's doing something crazy and dangerous, which has far-reaching consequences, although ultimately it will bring good. It feels like he has multiple metals and frequencies, and he's been experimenting with frequencies. He's obsessive, aware, controls everything, and he checks and double checks. He's writing. He has a kind of tablet and a small heavy object. It's a very kind of technical kind of science he feels to this. She goes on to say it feels like he's using this to program frequencies, and it feels polished bone to the touch. It feels as though there is a trigger mechanism. And it feels as though this has been inserted into the structure at the end of a small trench-like channel. So we don't really know what she's talking about here. It sounds like it's all very high technology, all to do with frequencies, though, because she keeps talking about how frequencies emitted allow the creation of a rip to slide through hyperspace in some kind of tunnel. So I think she's trying to describe there about how the movement mechanism of the structure itself. She said what they're doing is a legal, semi-legal, partially obscure project, but he's not going to share. So it almost feels like ethically there's something being done here by this life form that we probably won't like. He's also jealous of the knowledge, and knowledge is power. He's more interested in having it to himself than money. And it's a way to connect across looking glass. I don't know what she's talking about with that. The biological feels like it's in a cold place, high up, maybe isolated, maybe kind of, and this is where we get the Antarctica, Norway feeling. She feels he could be from another civilization and he's crossing over, and it feels like he's left something behind on the other side. Feels blue around him with faint traces. She feels he's doing experiments and he has constructed an artifact that he needs. She's asking the question here, who is he? And he feels like a person who's not part of our society. The darker forces would like to have him, but he's unattainable and he's slipped out of the group. Now the race is to find the system to try to make the artifact work and who has it. So I think she's picking up on other project aspects that we were asking there about, who has the technology, where is it now? Because we were saying it's probably been appropriated to the US. So that was her summary, and this is her RV session. So we'll just see if we can pick up any more details with this as we go through it. I didn't highlight any of this on her second one. Here she is trying to draw the land here, so this land contrasty, it has that kind of mountain type feeling, which she has here. And she's talking about the man-made here, trenched, and feels like it's been dug out. And she's talking about the location of the man-made here with trench-like details. I don't know what this is talking about, but this looks like it's talking about the structure as well, with alcoves and alike. She moves to the biological here, and this is the biological. She's trying to draw a biological that's thin. Again, she's trying to draw it here. Male, translucent skin, fussy. Feels like he's involved in a time experiment here. More details, trying to draw this biological. And again here, and she got the words vigilant, experimenting, calculating, and molten metals. You have to bear in mind, remote viewers, we have to be honest, the sketching for most remote viewers isn't great in RV because, you're kind of there at the target, but you're not there at the same time. I mean, your right and left brains get a little bit confused. So this is just our deep data that we've probably gone through. You're talking about the biological male, thin, simply clothed, pale-eyed, large mouth, tall, thin, walks floppily, which is quite interesting. More data here on the biological. Talking about the experiment here of frequencies. He has a tablet or a small object. Programming frequencies. I find the trigger mechanism interesting. I wonder, that would have been a good thing to get them to go back in and look at, because that sounds quite ominous. Again, talking about what this life form's doing here, programming frequencies, sliding through hyperspace, and some kind of time tunnel. And then they go back to the biological here, almost like a refocus to try to see what this man is doing. And this is where she discusses that he's involved in some kind of illegal, kind of partially obscured project that he's not going to share. And this is where she's talking about the knowledge stuff that we went through in the summary as well. Yep, and this is where she talks about the life form not being part of a society, and darker forces would like to have him. And this is her summary that she writes out that we went through in detail. So that was her remote viewing session on that one. Very interesting data. Then we move to David. David's in the UK here. And again, he had the same tasking. Completely, you'll see the difference in style in these remote viewers as well. Everyone's using a different method. And to let your viewers know as well that all these viewers will have different levels of experience as well. Some will have several years. Some of them only have a few months under their belt. So this is David, complete different style here. Feels like this was a tense, dramatic, energetic situation. And he had a life form involved here, a structure in a remote location. And there were other life here as well, which he said there were multiple life here and they were peculiar. He says there's something very specific about them or associated with them, the life. And it feels like this is almost like a movie character. Faces appear blue, and there's a crystal broken glass effect, like a comic book hero. Very cinematic here, lots going on. Intrepid, uninhabited area here, especially selected. And the life here, he's got a single chosen, no reneging here, like signing up, but you can't put out of a later commitment. Again, we don't know what this is about, but seems relevant for the target. And the other group of life, they're multiple here, and they're communicating between them, and this is important. He then tries to work out how they're communicating, and it almost feels like there's a single life and then there's a group of life as well. I think that's probably the Retrieval team honing in on this single life that Coral was picking up on from the craft or something. And he's detailing this is a quiet place as well. Some technical, impersonal details here. Lots of confusion. Don't want to let them down. And this one here is referring to the group or team of colleagues. He's trying to work out here what's most interesting about the A component. And there's a central person, and this is like a hub for information. And there's details about this being forbidden information here. And he's getting details like dense streaming, multi-streams of information, almost like an internet. And this is brought together to form in a single coherent narrative, not necessarily wholly accurate, but coherent. And he's also got like an AOL here of TV news. This is where he talks about he's got off somewhere else. Here he's talking about mundane structures in a special location. And it almost has a feeling like an office building. But then he details here, it has like a container here, which is localized, raised up and isolated. It feels like a box. It has a funky appearance, almost mirrored and shiny. We don't know what this is about, but it's very interesting and exotic. carefully designed and created, and it's a focal point here. If I had to guess at this without looking at the data, I would say that this might be some kind of container for the life itself, some kind of container contamination unit kind of place. The big question at this target is related to this location, which is probably what we were asking in the questions. We were trying to work out where the final destination was for all this. He's got other things here as well, but I haven't marked, which are probably relevant. He's got like a variable here, something about it, something being inside, outside, but also some kind of, he had the AOL or guess here of treasure hunt, which, when you're retrieving this kind of stuff, it is that's the kind of thing we're talking about, really. It is a bit like a treasure hunt. So this is where he goes and talks about this singular structure in more detail. It's been carefully designed and created. It's localized, it's isolated, raised up, looks funky, mirrored, or shiny. And it's almost like he's got the main life inside this structure. So the main life is something very specific about being associated with them. Face appears blue or distorted by cracked glass. Reminds me of a TV movie effect. A single life is chosen. They are committed. No backing out now. This place is intrepid, uninhabited, and specially selected. Again, we're trying to work out what's going on here, but it's definitely some kind of single life in some kind of very exotic singular structure. There's a team of people here communicating streams of information to a spokesperson. It's like an information hub, and they're constructing a narrative. I would say this is the retrieval team, compiling and getting all the data and information. You've got here, separate to this, mundane structures, which remind me of office buildings, AOL, like a TV studio. There's tension and there's a big question involved. Life is the main character in this, and the container-like structure serves as the focal point for the drama. We were tasked him to go back in to have a look at the mundane structures, and where else here? To try to look at the mundane structures, and then to try to locate where this happened on a global map, if he could do it. And I have to be honest, David we discussed this, he had a problem with his secondary tasking because he tried to do it whilst suffering with some COVID-like symptoms, and trying to do remote viewing when you're ill, it just doesn't work. So I don't think he got very well on his second RV session on this. He was picking up life energy in a mechanical type thing here, which was repetitive with some sounds and stuff. He was picking up on this life, which was like an overseer, supervisor, custodian type person. I don't think he picked up on anything that we could really put out with the data here. I haven't had a look at the map on his grids here, so I'll have to see where he kind of locating things in the world, looking at his grids, because this is a technique that I developed. So I'll have to look at that separately to see where his grids are. But he's got a sketch here of a structure, and this looks like it's a multi-story structure here, as he said, a bit like his office block, and he has this in a natural location. But he's got things like, he's got an observation area there, which I find quite interesting, and a natural lake here as well. So we'll see if we can try to put more data on that, separately. Again, he tried to draw these structures. It looks a bit like a hangar or something to me. Exactly. He says the windows are raised up high, like they don't want anyone breaking in or peeking in. It's mostly above ground. Reminds me of some buildings in London, but also windows have a bar across them. He's got like old school fuck you kind of architecture. I think that's trying to keep people out in some ways. Yeah. So this is just, him trying to describe this structure that we asked him to go back in and do. Again, I didn't pull out more information on this because I don't know what it means. We'd have to look at this a bit more in depth. Some of his other data here I found very interesting. He had this triangular structure here, which he said felt like it was like a trophy. And it looked a bit like an Olympic torch, or like the sorting out from Harry Potter. So a very, strange shaped object. And he also had a male that was wearing something strange, almost like a full body suit outfit there or something. I think he was trying to draw the structure here again. I have to be honest, this drawing here actually reminded me of some of the sketches I saw, some of the models I saw from Bob Lazar when he talks about the seats inside the craft of the sport model that he looked at. This looked very much to me like the one-piece seat that he had, where he said it would look like it was molded into the floor. It had all curved edges and stuff. I'm maybe reading more into this than maybe, but also this device here, this Pinnacle device with the other Pinnacle device coming the other way, also reminded me a little bit of the Bob Lazar sports light type UFO type thing. So I'm wondering if David was describing some of this, because he talks about an ornately dressed man which is going to sit in the chair, and he said here, I thought there was going to be another life here, but there's this chair instead. So he's placing some importance on this chair. But as I said, he was ill, so we didn't really push him on this one, and his data was a bit inconsistent. Some more data there. We haven't looked at any of this in any great detail at this point. But, he's got AOLs like prize and accomplishment, which, I can imagine there's a lot of that when you pick up one of these artifacts. And he's got things like Rubik's Cube here as well. Stuff. So there are some hints here to some data that probably needs a bit more work. And as he wrote here, too tired, because he was feeling really ill when he did this. Yeah. With, remote viewers are normal human beings, and that's just the way, people have it. But you also got like Tasmania and Egypt, in some of his location data there. So
let's focus on that for a second. So the point I reached is in the ocean, but close to Tasmania. And what was he saying about Egypt?
I don't have a high success rate using the cods, because he used a system that I developed, or I'm trying to develop, to try to find places globally. So it's his first time using it. But after his point in the ocean that he found, he did it again whilst looking at the map, and he felt it was Egypt. But, this is his first time using a completely new location finding technique that I developed. So, we have
COVID. With COVID.
With COVID, yeah. So we have to take this with a pinch of salt kind of thing.
All right, let's stop right here, and then we can discuss the other viewers in the next episode. Leave cliffhanger on the first two. So
yeah,
it was an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to get to the
interesting data so far. Yeah.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.